There are only 4 types of startup leadership hire: adders, subtractors, dividers, and multipliers. Only 2 will scale your startup. The other 2 will sink it. The multiplier matrix makes it simple. Imagine having access to a tribe of mentors, experts in the biggest questions in tech. This is making revenue tick. Justin, welcome back. It's you know what, we had an amazing conversation. It became our top podcast at the time ever viewed.
Wow.
It's been taken over since then, so we're going to beat it with this recording.
Yes.
You've been a ridiculously busy man since we last spoke. What have you been up to?
Yeah, well, I've been coaching, I've been writing books, I've been continuing to work with teams. I'm 6 years into the consulting business, and I have been a part of 11 books and 10 books in my name now. And so it's a real exploration of niche and calling card, because when someone has a specific issue I fix, like it's an SDR team, it's full cycle AEs that are struggling with sales, it's maybe CROs that are fractional or trying to go into consulting. And so a lot of that also comes into mindset and positive thinking. And there's a whole inner game, to make the golf analogy, right, that I've also found important. And I've just sort of now been driving all the books at once, continuing to build them out. And I've been working with this publisher. He's independent in Arizona, and I'm on my 7th book now in 3 years. So yeah, it's been prolific and interesting. I'll write one book and there's like a missing concept or chapter, and then that becomes another book. So I definitely want to slow down. I have 2 out at once now, so I'm over my skis for sure.
Yeah. Your output is quite ridiculous. I'm not convinced you're entirely human.
Yes, I do have a clone, the movie Multiplicity with Michael Keaton. It did bomb, and that was about me.
Yeah, nice. Well, so what I was going to ask you about. So obviously you got 2 books since we. So when we did the first podcast together, your like millionth podcast as an individual, we were talking about Cold Call Algo. You've since released The Frame, and then you've got Phoenix Rising coming out. I'm really interested in The Frame because I see a lot of young people talking about like Machiavellian and the concept around like control. But often from like this quite like negative viewpoint, like the world's against them, and like they don't really understand. They understand that there's influence happening, but it's like this whole like it's beyond what we can see, and it's this dark force that are trying to manipulate us. Yours is the opposite, which is about like understanding the psychology and taking control of it to go and achieve a bunch of amazing things like independence. What's the thinking behind The Frame?
Yeah, so there is 48 Laws of Power, got so popular by Robert Greene, and then of course like hip hop loved it, 50 Cent loved it, and then 50 Cent did a book with Robert Greene called The 50th Law, which I loved. And these were sort of the hidden laws that the intelligentsia, the ruling class, the emperors, the royalty, the nobility, and the feudal systems from the Medicis back in the 16th century knew. And a lot of those were like, don't outshine the master, coinciding, like you said, with the powerful manipulative forces that are there. Well, in a postmodern world, number one, The Frame, as we've written it, I wrote it with a British friend named Johnny Staker, who's been very successful in exiting companies and also doing consulting, which is very high pressure, intense situations. And we wrote this book to be a time capsule, so it'll be relevant 100 years from now. It's really anachronistic. You can't pin down when it happened or where. There are certain situations in life where you have nanoseconds that will influence the future. Like you will get or lose the deal. You will make or break the relationship. You will grab funding or not. A first impression is still massive. Another interesting exploration in this book is as you're slipping and bombing and the frame is snapping or breaking, are you doomed? Or can you in real time regain your frame, regain your composure and kind of save the sale? And all of us that have been in sales for 10, 20 years, we know that's possible. But the human brain, fight, flight, or freeze tends to lack a tool system to deal with that. So the book has 12 chapters, 10 laws. Every section ends with hold the frame, where we then straight up go into things like historical narratives from, wars to religious figures to philosophy to neuroscience. It's really fascinating just to kind of back up. But it's a meta framework or way of thinking, where as you read it, you self reflect and you can't unsee it. You start to see where your frame is weak or it's leaking. So that's why, like, obviously, you can't change your life on one read, but awareness of what you're doing wrong is the first step. And it's not just a book about the 1% or becoming like elite. There's no snobbery here. Like, everyone wants to be excellent in their chosen field. So I would say you can have a high frame and have a franchise of dollar stores, or you can have a high frame and have two Aston Martin dealerships, right? You can win in business in many ways. Like, someone can wear a T-shirt like Mark Cuban and be a billionaire, and
Mm.
someone can be in a posh suit and be parking your car. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Or they could be Ralph Lauren. So I mean, it's been a lot of fun to write it. It really explores how you carry yourself, your posture, how you arrive. It talks about the collisions, about body language, deeper psychology, tonality of humans over Zooms, over in-person meetings, and then kind of gives you a set of templates and tools to approach this in new ways. Biggest part of this thing is silence,
Mm.
um, and being willing to pause, which is weird being interviewed because I feel like I'm talking too much, but
Yeah. No, it is true, isn't it? It's like when if I think about what my clients want to hire for in terms of the behaviors, particularly of leaders, they mention words like gravitas, and
hmm
fewer mention words like poise, which comes in like the John Wooden, and which feels a lot more like the frame. But there's a lot of books about this sort of subject, but it's not that applicable. And I know that you're a massive fan of making stuff that people can not only get conceptually, and it helps them to think differently about their thinking, but behaviorally, how they're going to turn up, and then the results they're going to achieve. And I want just there's a fundamental set of principles when you're thinking about writing a book. You don't want a book that people just go, that's really interesting, and then just move on to the next one. You're trying to create this lasting impact. You want this to be relevant in 100 years. What's your mentality about sharing the lessons that you're learning?
yeah.
Where you're trying to achieve an impact rather than just make something that's deeply intellectually interesting.
I think everything needs utility that can be used. And so a lot of the books I've put out are kind of like power user manuals. Also, they're short. Tech Powered Sales was 90,000 words. Then it kind of got into these 45,000 word books. The Frame's 33,000 words. And Phoenix is only 17,000 words. So it can be absorbed in one or two sittings. I always joke,
Mm.
it's the length of Bad Boys 3, but not as good. That's my joke. But yeah, so you want to have things that are useful where there's utility to it. You also want to have sort of innovation to see around the curve, to look in something. And then the best way to create new content is mashups. So when we're looking at this book initially, we were looking at books like The Game from Neil Strauss, which was just legendary, like, pick up on Sunset Strip type stuff and not elevated. However, that high pressure environment does overlap into psychology of, like, dating versus sales, and that became like the pinky toe of it, one small piece. Then we were looking at Oren Klaff, Pitch Anything, and he has an
Mm.
exploration of frame psychology, but that comes from Goffman, who was a sociologist that wrote a book called Frame Analysis in the 60s or 70s, I think. So it's a common concept. And then, books like the Robert Greene Canon, Art of Seduction, 48 Laws of Power, 33 Strategies of War, all of that, but
Mm.
modernizing it, making it more minimal. That can be very dense to read. Like, we're sitting in there like 5 paragraphs of Alexander the Great, which is cool, right? But what if I could just, have aphorisms of, like, this general felt this, Winston Churchill went through that, and then it's kind of, so there's a sparseness to it and interesting bibliography. So I always want to write a book at the level of like a Gladwell or a Taleb and really synthesize. And I think that was really cool about the yin and yang of how working with Johnny, because he has scenes in there like this billionaire flies in a helicopter, puts his feet on his desk, tries to shave 3 million off the deal, and he's in his late 20s and just walks out on the guy. The feel of the book is noir. So like in Seven Figure Formula, I went satire, And, in this new one, Phoenix Rising, it's very like alchemist type feeling, like these mystical feels. But in the frame, it has almost like a James Bond, John le Carre spy novel feeling of these vignettes that open every chapter. But then it really feels like Succession or Billions because the settings and locations are very much that. So it's thrilling to read. It's full of allegory and story, and you come away changed with your personal brand, your sales approach, how you approach other people, how you communicate. And the easiest question to understand the material is just how would I raise my frame? How would I hold my frame?
Mm.
Where's the frame leaking? Like, even if you don't read the book, you just ask yourself those questions, you immediately start to see it. You're being too needy, right? So I can go into the 10 laws, I can bring them up, but what other questions do you have?
Oh yeah, I definitely want to understand the start of your journey. So you're very self-aware, but also a lot of people would say you're quite weird, right? And you have an incredibly strong belief in your capability, which comes across in how you project yourself. But I
True.
wonder if you're always like that. So where was your frame weak when you were starting out?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I had a father that built a really big tech company, in the 90s, like right around the time I was 13. So, right in that changing moment,
Yeah.
becoming a man, like I was watching him make hundreds of millions of dollars in building the top company, working with people like Mark Andreessen. So, he built this massive,
Mm.
portal to the internet in the first dot-com boom. Then I watched my brother become like one of the top people at Google and become a multimillionaire. And then like my grandfather was a nuclear physicist. My other grandfather was like an industrialist. He sold electronics company to the Japanese. He had like 35 million. He was super successful.
Mm.
But I never felt that that was my own frame. I never really had that confidence. So to me, it was just graft. So what people need to know about me, like I started in boiler rooms in telemarketing at 21, making $7 an hour, staying late on Christmas Eve to get $100. I was a musician. I was an artist. I was a little bit shy. I was soft spoken. I didn't know much about business.
Mm.
So 10 years selling on phones, I finally got to Salesforce and moved to Silicon Valley. And then I spent another 10 years working up in tech companies, becoming a director of sales, an RVP, a VP. I'd worked at 13 startups across Los Angeles, Santa Barbara, St. Louis, New York, Seattle, ton in San Francisco, and lived in all those places. And I think I just spent enough time. I collected the 10,000 hours in the business to become super confident about how to sell software. I had a mentor in Tony Hughes who became my co-writer on Tech Powered Sales. And so by the time I was like 37, I was making real money. And by the time I was like 40, 41, going in consulting, I really knew I could bring something special to this field and to the ability to write.
Mm.
That said, like when I was 10 years old, my teacher in third grade is like, "You're the best writer that ever came through our school. I've been here for 35 years, thousands of kids." I was like, "Oh, she says that to everyone. That's so nice." So that's like 1990. I got my first book deal in 2020,
Mm.
right? So 30 years later to the day. And I always tell people, don't wait 30 years to do what you know you're gifted at.
Yeah.
So we wrote that book and it became a smash hit. I've got 1,000 reviews over these books and somewhere in the 1% of nonfiction. I just love to do it. I love cranking them out. There's a bit of a, a hobby and a disease. It's a really crazy thing. The time on books, if you've done one, is all in the editing. You might write the thing for 10, 20, 30 hours and spend 50 hours editing it. So Johnny and I were just going so deep on the edits. Chapter 3 is a little slow, speed it up. Let's change these references here. Let's change these 12 references here. And we're just constantly, taking the constraint of 33,000 words and the Jenga of moving it around.
Mm. Yeah, I'm that's really curious. Another thing you said to me, which stuck out, is about the leaking of the frame. So I know that you wouldn't change much of your experience because all of those things have added up to your perspective now. But let's say you had this book 20 years ago. Where was your frame leaking back then that this would have helped you to fix?
I was really caught up on not having a college degree and I get defensive about it. Like I took an interview at Oracle, like a tribunal, the nine around me. And they're like, "Why haven't you worked in your education?" And I got defensive and I interviewed at Amazon, I got defensive. I used to wear ties and suits and like overdress because I was raising money for charity. I thought that would change. And so I probably would have gone into consulting in my mid 20s. Like I have a client now who's, 31 and he just did 100K a month doing consulting, right? And he's been in tech companies a long time, but I could have done a lot of the things I did at 41, at 31. And that's kind of what I inspire people to do. Getting the level of confidence and believing in yourself to the level where, you'll go out there and write a book or be a consultant. When you get rejected as a consultant, they're not rejecting Salesforce, LinkedIn, they're rejecting Justin Michael Inc.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's a Richard Washington is getting turned down. It can feel very personal and it can be very daunting. And I've worked with some of these top CROs making 500, 750, even $1 million a year, and they have imposter syndrome. And it makes no logical sense. It's the baby elephant tied to the chain, and now it's like a jumbo elephant, and it's looking at the chain, kick the chain, just break the chain. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Amazing. I love it. Levels it for people. I'm curious about the laws. Then take us through the 10 laws.
I'm going to take you through the 10 laws. I have a French washing machine that just loves to beep at me. These Malays. So this is like the trappings of success. Yeah, I have pulled these up. Let me see. Yes, perfect. So we didn't do the book like, chapter 1, law 1. We didn't go that Robert Greene. We didn't want to do it. So we have sort of these meandering chapters. And the last is sort of poetics, like a Marcus Aurelius. And we kind of write a letter to ourselves 100 years from now, like after death. So there's kind of this really cool conversation between billionaires that happens as well. But okay, law 1, non-neediness. And this was in a book, from Mark Manson, a book called Models, actually. And it's really like, if you're needy in a deal, if you say something like, hey, I'd love to meet with you, I'm wide open all week. Not that you should lie about it, right? But people are like, they get desperate, they get pushy. So you really want to avoid that. That's law number 1. Law number 2, law of signal. And that's, you're literally projecting a signal. Like I literally wore a samurai cat shirt just to show you, like, I don't need to like be dressed up to hold a high frame. People see a certainty that they're like, he's a killer. Like he knows what he's doing and he can help me. So that's the funny thing. So that's a signal, just in the tone, just how my body language, how I sit, how I talk. That's the law of signal. It's the subtext to what's happening. Law of cold command. Cold calling, cold prospecting, showing up in difficult situations. I made my whole career on that. You know what I mean? And so, to really do that effectively, what's your cold approach? Most cold approaches are low frame. Like send an offer. Oh, you're not going to close a $15,000 coaching deal with a squeeze page or like a Kajabi site, maybe a course. Let's see. So that was the law of cold commands, number 3. Number 4, the law of subtext. Okay, as I'm talking to you, there's the connotation or implication of what I'm saying based on the tonality, the composure. So it's this kind of a sister law. The law of frame collision. There's always 2 frames. That was in the Oren books. 1 frame will always win. So like you're at a 7 and I'm at a 7. So I go to 8 and you go to 9, you go to 10. But in these sales situations or with investors or with, any high pressure situation, a lot of times the person comes in high D, high dominance. What do? Well, it's social Aikido. You let them be powerful and then you flip that energy. So how do you master the frame collision? And how can you be powerful and have a humble frame, but still dominate a room and still have the powerful people just take you seriously when you walk into rooms? Interesting. 6, the law of qualification. You're filtering. You have to move from a world where you're chasing everything to you set up systems and you build the garden, the butterflies are coming to you and you're filtering. It's sort of the velvet rope concept. Like you built a great podcast, people are trying to get on all the time, and you're just trying to match it now. The polarity has shifted. Everything should run like that. 7, the law of scarcity. Obviously, scarcity makes things valuable, right? If you want to get a Ferrari, you got to be accredited. You have $1 million. You already have a Ferrari. Get on this waiting list. All of that makes it scarce. They sell 12,000 Ferraris a year. Pretty crazy. The law of psychological sequence, number 8. That's really sort of the hero's journey and the arc of how you communicate and interact with people. Reach, withdraw, push, pull. right? Like it's as mundane as don't send 27 messages to the CEO of the company. That's why things like the 3-day rule, like this stuff established to try to help people feel to do this synthetically. But there's a sequence of behaviors in a deal, in an interaction. Number 9, the law of frame of recovery. This is the frame break or the frame snap, right? You're in the boardroom and a glass breaks. The slide projector goes down. I just was watching Larry Ellison, Oracle, as literally his gear went down. He laughed about it. Everybody laughed, and he was just calm.
Mm.
This guy's like the richest billionaire, and he can't get his projector to work, right? So that's kind of cool. There's a great video where Steve Jobs gets heckled that I love, and where he just empathizes, something about Flash or something. Watch that. Let's finish it out though. So then we have number 10 is the law of embodied frame. If you read this book enough times and you walk through sort of the aphorisms and exercise, do this, do that, look at it a different way, you will level your frame, you will change. Right? It's like if you keep singing off key, you're going to get lessons and start learning to sing on key. Right? If you have like toothpaste on your shirt, you're going to change your shirt, get an iron shirt. Like you're gonna see where your frame is weak or lower frame. It's not a status thing. It's not about you looking wealthy or more successful. It's about your highest self, right? And the facets of the diamond and you putting yourself forward for your great. I mean, Mahatma Gandhi had a great frame and Dalai Lama had an amazing frame. You can have an amazing frame in a loincloth. You can have an amazing frame, David Copperfield as a magician, or as an ordinary person. And we've all met really grounded people that are wonderful to interact with, even at the post office. So that's what's really trippy about frame. And some people just have naturally really strong frames. It builds a lot before the age of 7, so psychotherapy is helpful. Introspection is helpful, but David C. Baker talks about this, and it's been my mantra is client validation, right? Like, so if you want to be great at sales, do a lot of selling. If you want to be a great author or consultant, write a bunch of books, hone in on the positive feedback you're getting, listen to the crowd. I have tons of testimonials. The more I listen to those, I have more and more confidence because I'm actually tangibly helping people.
If you ask your team what a great leadership hire looks like and everyone gives you a different answer, you're hiring in the dark. You need a shared language for what drives scale and impact, not vague traits. The multiply matrix gives you that clarity. Let's define what great really looks like.
I'm very interested to understand your what you see. So you've been thinking a lot about this. You've been iterating it with your colleague. You've been writing and studying to produce these 10 laws. When you think about the common mistakes, the things that people are messing up on without being consciously aware of them, what are some of the most obvious mistakes that people are making about how they project themselves, which diminishes their frame?
I have this client, Michael Hewitt, who's an opera singer and tonality trainer. He teaches people to speak. And I've gone through media training because I used to be a musician. So I would sit on a stage with Elton John and Michael Jackson's backup singer, and he would teach me how to talk, like the media training. People aren't calm. They don't relax. They don't take a deep breath. They ramble. They are terrified to stop. We're not talking, fill the silence, right? So you get these kind of rambling, insecure, mainly people. So powerful people make a statement. That's the answer. How much did the elephant weigh? 8 tons. I don't need to go on and on. And I read this amazing book called 60 Seconds and You're Hired by Robin Ryan. And I used to wear a cheap suit, take the interview, like maroon tie, gray suit, look flammable. I'd look at the ceiling, I'd get defensive, I'd ramble. And this is leakage because it's all me with a chip on my shoulder trying to avoid this topic or stay away from that. If there's a flaw or something wrong, face the blowtorch, right? And that's where you see frame masters. Some of these politicians, like you listen to Barack Obama's speech and they ask him a brutal question and he just faces it, has the perfect answer, is dead calm. Economy of movement in his body. Now, whether that's an act or real, it's in the eye of the beholder, but certainly that is modeling something strong. So how we handle silence, pausing, the listen to talk ratio, body language, how calm you can stay if you can be relaxed under pressure. I have clients, I meet with people who are like, the public speaking is just, they just hate it, like if they quantified self-device, it's like their stress level goes crazy. I compare it to like the biathlete, right? You ski down the mountain and then you have to have like a 22 gun and hit the thing, and you got to like lower your heart rate to dead stop. So yeah, cool, calm, collective is the new power. A lot of these speakers like Jordan Belfort and Grant Cardone, they're so fired up and they're, 3 Red Bulls. And that's not the way trusted advisors are. You go buy a house, you go really spend some money. Those people are calm. You go deal with some attorneys, state plan, like any kind of like really heavy thing you got to do in your life. The real trusted advisors, they're calm, they're collected. You know what I mean? Like it's, you got to imagine you go to the doctor and they're like, "Oh, you're sick. Oh, this is great." Or like it, like the attorney is just happy. So yeah, I'm trying to give practical examples for people. I think salespeople, they breathe too heavily. They're over eager. They're hungry. And that's why that first law, just that non-neediness, be silent more, listen more, calm your body, be present. And we're living in a world where everyone's multitasking, the BlackBerry, they're always like, everyone's just scattered everywhere. Like just actually be there. That'll really incredibly change your life.
I wonder how it affects leaders. So you might have the reality, a lot of people probably would. I know you love fixing this problem, but the team doesn't have enough pipeline, they don't have enough opportunities, they're under quota, they're forecasting a miss, the business is under pressure, they need to hit the next round. There's a lot of pressure on generating revenue and having a great call in terms of like, or a great next meeting. What are some of the things that you help leaders with so that they can transfer that calmness and the poise to their teams so they don't carry that desperation into their calls and end up messing up their opportunities?
Yeah, a lot of what I'm getting hired to do now is help teach millennial and Gen Z like C-level prospecting, reaching out to the C-suite, because over and over again it's sort of they'll reach lower to the VPs or they won't hit certain accounts and they'll protect. It's like this idea of feel the fear and do it anyway, which is very, Jack Canfield in a sense, but do 2 things that scare you. Reach for the C-suite and be willing to get delegated down. But okay, what do I say when I'm on with a CEO? So like Jamal Reimer is a friend who did Mega Deal Secrets. He has this tool called Wiser, which is a fork of LLMs like AI. So it does research to get you to the value prop. It's a point of view generator. Essentially, it generates a POV. And that's really what I'm working with. Like you said, acumen, gravitas. Well, how do you have gravitas if you're not sure, you don't understand their business? So the research isn't finding something clever that's going to get responded to and get the meeting. That's kind of a straw man in an empty suit. It's really understanding. It's more like fishing. The Old Man and the Sea would be a better book than sitting around playing with LLMs all day, because you have to understand the fish. The biggest complaint of C-level executives is they didn't understand my business. So P&L understanding, like I have this client, Mark Perriou, he just does financial education training. That's really big. Talk to your own CFO, your own CRO, your own CEO if you're young and coming up, and just start understanding how executives think and how business works. Read the Wall Street Journal, whatever newspaper you believe in. Yeah, so I've kind of taken linguistics and I call it heuristics, which is sort of like shortcuts. And the idea that is if you use templates or frameworks or formulas, the templates would be the lowest level because then you're just recycling the same content over and over again. So what I came up with was sort of a meta layer of linguistic communication. So I came up with a bunch of these, like brevity, making things short, having pain and fear in your communications, right? Like senior sellers know how to probe for pain and they know how to use fear of missing out or fear of messing up. Opportunity cost, they understand some of these business concepts they put in the email, but it's been very hard to prompt ChatGPT to get much more than vanilla, like just generic slop.
Yeah.
So I break those down. I've got 9 of them in my books, but you could make hundreds of those. So I'm really teaching, executives how to think, how to write, and how to trigger the brain in a couple different ways. Cold calling is usually over triggering fight or flight because it's a stranger. And emailing is usually not triggering enough.
I'm curious to understand if you. So one of the things that a lot of this introspection does, and then having models and rules and things that you can compare it to, is once you've understood that about yourself, is then you can start to work on other people and spot their frames. So let's say that you're talking to someone who is overly posturing. Let's say it's in a sales process and they're being very, very dominant. You've obviously said one of those things is to give them the chance to have power and then switch the energy. What else is working really well for you? Let's say we're talking, there's some salespeople or sales leaders listening to this and they're going, look, we want to be able to get into a position where we're having a much higher level of conversation, much deeper, much more impactful, where we're going to go and ultimately build the type of relationship where we actually end up closing this business. What's working really well that we could share?
You mean just kind of like raise the frame when they're dealing with senior level executives?
Yeah, when you're aware that the person you're going to be interacting with loves to have a very dominant frame. So it's like they have a position where they make it often uncomfortable for other people, particularly let's say salespeople going into that conversation, because they're clearly, the boss of that scenario. They're clearly the dominant force. How can you disarm, whether that's the correct word, but how could you play that situation, manage that situation in a way that gets a positive outcome?
Yeah, I mean, I think letting people be right is really powerful. There's been so much written on the challenger sale and trying to go in and provoke, but it's kind of, I call it social aikido or social tai chi. Like that's my objection handling framework. It's too expensive. Totally understand. We've had multiple clients that thought that. How are you looking at the ROI? So I have this whole Codex 14, which is all objection handling. So if someone comes in at me with a lot of domination and power, I kind of do an Aikido role where I let them be powerful. I listen to them. I tease it out a little bit. I don't react. If they neg me, if they're manipulative or passive aggressive or evasive, I sort of just let it roll off a duck to water. There was this amazing experience where I was calling a CEO, and because my tonality is sort of mid-range because I make so many calls, or I did at the time, and he's like, well, you're young, you'll learn. And I'm sitting there and I'm 40 and I'm like, oh yeah, I'll learn. Like I didn't correct him. Why wouldn't I correct him? Because I want to let him be powerful. Because I just, they had a saying when I was on the road back in the sales years that they'll know you by the quality of your questions. So I think acumen comes down to questioning. So like even this week, like I'm working with a cybersecurity team and I listened to this rep call this CISO talk the entire time. And like the guy barely had a word in edgewise, didn't learn anything.
Yeah.
And that's my phone technique is really lethal because I flip around calls and get people talking to me really quickly. You need to find a way to be provocative and curious. And that's what Jay Abraham said. If you're the most curious person in the world, you'll be the most fascinating person in the world to them. And that comes out of how to win friends and influence people as well.
Yeah, love it. Jay Abraham, big mentor of mine. I actually went to an event which is like a sort of small round table with like 20 people, and Jay Abraham was talking about strategies of preeminence, and I was like, this guy's an absolute genius. I love that. I'm curious then. So let's talk about your new book, Phoenix Rising, coming out in April. I can't find a huge amount about this. It's a lot of curiosity, and it's making me very interested. Tell people, give us a bit of sizzle. What's going on in that book?
I mean, I only really revealed this like 24 hours ago quietly. As the frame came out, what it didn't do is go into like the woo-woo and metaphysics level. So 20 years ago, when I was 26, I'm 46 now. Can't believe it. This is convincing hairpiece, not but I met Jack Canfield at a fundraiser, and he gave me the Secret DVD. And then about 6 weeks later, I ran into Haley Byrne, the daughter of Rhonda Byrne, and I ended up going up and hanging with Rhonda right when The Secret. I mean, it sold 35 million copies. I think it made like 200 million. It was a sensation. And so Jack Canfield himself gave it to me. And I really started thinking about that. And this was based loosely on a book called The Science of Getting Rich of 1910, which might have influenced Napoleon Hill and Think and Grow Rich. So I read every book like that, from Eckhart Tolle to Byron Katie to Sid Banks to Neville Goddard. But then I wrote a book called Attraction Selling, all about metaphysics and sales. It did pretty well. But there was one thing I found after it was a distinction between surrendered manifestation and manufactured manifestation. And this is really a difference between Western and Eastern philosophy, but it does pull right out of the Bible. And what it means is that if you believe there's a higher power, then why do you have to set the goal? And then if you believe there's a higher force, whether that's quantum mechanics, energy, the God of your understanding, why would you have to figure out how to get there? So in the West, it's about goal orientation. Okay, write down your goals 10 times a day, Brian Tracy. I am this, I am rich, I am successful. Prayer is different because you're surrendering it to a higher power and having faith that something good is coming your way. And that was a concept of my books of pronoia, which is the opposite of paranoia, which is the universe is plotting to do me good. So I wrote this entire book about a phoenix metaphor that burns the past and surrenders. It opens with people like burning their dream boards and like you writing their goals and burning it, because I found for wealth and identity and make 100,000 a month or $1 million a year, even upwards of that, the frame or who I am had to change. So we put you on a polygraph on a lie detector and we just gauge your nervous system. Okay, Justin, you're a $200,000 earner, $400,000 earner, 500,000, 700,000, million. At a certain point, the lie detector, it shows that I don't believe it on a nervous system level. So your identity, which is ontology is the word, like the theory of being or consciousness. This book was initially called The Law of Becoming. So there's a law of attraction that what you focus on grows and you attract what you are. There's a law of assumption, which if you assume things, they tend to happen, expectation. And in neuroscience, that's the reticular activating system. But the law of becoming or being is that on a deep level, your DNA, who you believe you are, and the decisions in your heart of hearts you make about yourself becomes the ultimate manifestation of your life. So you look at every system in nature and it's wildly abundant. And so currency is the current flowing through you. And there's conductors and insulator. And so you're with your negative thoughts and self-sabotage and self-doubt and childhood traumas, you're sitting there slowing the current down. I'll give you one more analogy. We're all in this cosmic river of time and eternity and continuum. And we're in the river, and I've done this, and I'm in the canoe, and I'm paddling upstream, cranking on this canoe paddle into the wind. And I see this guy go by, or gal, and it's like, oh, they're just floating down the river, Tom Sawyer, Huckleberry Finn style. What if this? What if you relaxed and surrendered and calmed that churning water in your head and your heart, and then just float out to the infinite sea of potential? And so a lot of the greatest things that have happened in my life have been like after really traumatic experiences. I've had 3 extinction level events. I always joke with people, I'm like, I should be dead, on drugs, bankrupt, and in jail. And I'm like, if you die, you can't do the other ones. But no, I mean, all jokes aside, like I've had a few brutal things go down and I write about them in the book. And it's right after that that I go, okay, I surrender. I give up like all the struggle and effort and trying. Like I'm just going to let go and have faith that something good will come. I'm still alive. That's also kind of a 50 Cent, right? He got shot 9 times right through the face, lost his record deal. However, his internal psychology is like, I survived a face shot. So at that point, like it's kind of like soldiers. They come in the military and they survive these impossible things. It's kind of a downhill run mentally to become a civilian after that. So there is a lot of PTSD and tough things that happen. But some of these folks, like Jocko Willink, or they come out and they do incredible things in the civilian sector. So that's the premise of this book, is all these allegories and stories about surrendered manifestation. And it's called Rewriting the Law of Attraction, which is really cheeky. Like, who does he think he is to get to do that? But it'll make people buy it and read it.
Yeah, I like it. And I know, because I posted about Pronoia after a conversation with Alina Vandenberg from Chili Pipe, where she talked about feeling lucky. And I was like, I totally feel lucky. Like, I know, I just back myself, things are going to happen. And it's not that I believe I am this like incredibly talented thing. I just believe that with the energy I put out, I will like find the right people or fix the problem or something will come my way. I just believe it. But there are a lot of people who don't believe that, and they believe they're unlucky. Like what would you say to some people who are going, I feel the opposite of Pronoia. I feel more paranoid, particularly with like all the worry they see on the news and the market and all that stuff that's going on.
Yeah.
It's telling us that we're in for infinite doom.
Everything in nature and science and physics, when you zoom out, really points to it being the opposite way. So if you think of like Peter Diamandis or Ray Kurzweil or even Elon Musk, the raising of human consciousness, we're kind of living in the best time ever with the greatest quality of life. And there are so many bad things and scourges and COVIDs and things, but I think there's a certain optimism I've developed toward life because I was pessimistic for a long time. When I turned 41, like Ian Koniak sent me the Go Giver, and I really just started to build my consulting practice on service-based prospecting. And I love that. I love helping people succeed. Their results fuels me. So, you can have various worldviews. You can be very negative, but have a very strong identity and still attract wealth. There's plenty of billionaires that are corrupt and not the best people, right? So, however you see it, that's what it'll be.
Yeah.
Whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. I think that's, Henry Ford or some quote like that. So,
yeah.
But where I'm going with this material is that you're going to attract a dream life or actually correspond to the nature of your song. You're going to create this beautiful life faster by letting go and by letting go of strain and striving and hustle and grinding. And like we're returning now to the 6-day entrepreneur week. And Rhonda blew my mind. She'd say things like, if you were in a locked room alone with just a chair and a table, and you just sat there and thought of a feather, the door would open and they would give you a feather. It was like really crazy Zen stuff like that. It's that powerful. And then I've run into like, gurus from India, like, you're manifesting over 765 years. Or a whole other trip of reincarnation and all that. So without touching the third rail of religion, the book always works though, because whether you're looking at the Christian perspective of like, asking it will be given. I mean, the first law of attraction was very primitive: ask, believe, receive. This is more of a process of think about something and then let it go, and then let the universe surprise you with all these wonderful things that come into your life. I think a lot of people are holding on to the past and baggage, and so I've put rituals in the book. I had some readers that brought up the rituals, and so I've put them in each chapter. And it's things like standing in water and reflecting. It's a lot of like just centering yourself and being in the moment and being present and being in the now. I think it's a really powerful book. They read the whole thing like 5 times. They send me like 3 pages of feedback. I've never had anything like this because I think people are fascinated with metaphysics and the meaning of life. And I'm not starting a religion or anything, but my philosophy that's allowed me to have so much output and get to the top of these different industries really fast is now very fascinating to people to understand the radical ways that I think and work and live my life.
Yeah, I love it. One of the most impactful books I ever read was Secrets of the Millionaire Mind by T. Harv Eker. And
I love that. I've listened to that.
Yeah, exactly. And it makes me think like this will be a bit like that. And it was, I used to read a lot of business books, but this was like one that was all about like really getting into the psychology of what made the richest people rich. And I had to go through a whole load of training around like unlearning a bunch of like financial limitations that I built up in my life. Like you say, my nervous system would have been doing that on a lie detector test. So I'm fascinated to read it. Maybe we can come back on and do another pod once it's out and talk about some of the impact.
Let's do that. Yeah, I know we're almost out of time, but I would say that this is a crazy moment. 2026, 20 years since I read The Secret. I've got 2 books out at once now, The Frame and The Phoenix. They're both super short. They kind of form something you can read in 1 or 2 sittings. If you read them and reflect, you will not be the same person. Read them once for inspiration and twice for transformation. And it's just been phenomenal. It's great to get on the show and talk with you.
Yeah, absolute pleasure. What would be a lasting thought that you'd like to leave with our listeners today?
I think just you got to love yourself and give up resentments and understand that's what's happening inside your head and your heart and your mind does reflect in your life. Another one I like to say is what if you're not your thoughts, your body, or your mind? What are you and where are you? And so one of the ideas is, I am that I am, the observer, the chooser, the person observing your life. And you can change from that vantage point. So if you're not into woo woo or magic or miracles or feeling that you can change the course of your life, don't read this. If you believe in higher power and you've surrendered to it already, do read this. If you're a control freak and a hustler in sales or business, this is really going to help you live longer. I'll be honest, because you're going to finally feel a little relief. That's what I got.
Yeah, spoken like someone living in Switzerland rather than in California. I love it.
Yeah, it's very clean.
Absolutely. Good man. Justin, absolute pleasure as always, my friend. I really love talking to you, and I can't wait to see the Phoenix Rising book, and I definitely will get a copy. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, Rich. A lot of fun.
Everyone else will see you on the next episode. Cheers, my friend. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening. And if you enjoyed this conversation, we've got a newsletter called Growth Magnet on LinkedIn, where we take the best insights from all of these episodes and turn them into bite-sized format for you to enjoy.